Imagine this. It's 1949, and you publish a book so scandalous, so revolutionary, that the Vatican literally bans it. Well, that's exactly what philosopher Simone de Beauvoir did. The book was called The Second Sex, and it didn't just spark a little outrage, it completely changed the world.
And, the whole thing, all 900+ pages of this monumental work, really started with a single question. It sounds so simple on the surface, but it's so deep it became the bedrock for her entire investigation into what it even means to be human.
What is a woman? Just let that sit for a second. De Beauvoir realized this was the absolute starting point for everything. But here's the kicker. The very fact that she had to ask this question at all, that was the real discovery.
I mean, think about it, right? A man is just a man. He's treated as the default setting for humanity, the neutral, the standard. A woman, though, she's always defined by how she's different from that standard. She's the second sex. So the question is, how on earth did we get here?
To really get the power behind the book's ideas, we have to look at the world it came from. This thing wasn't written in some academic ivory tower. No, it was forged in the very real, very intense fires of post-war France. Let's put that in perspective for a moment. She's writing this in a super conservative society, a country obsessed with rebuilding and repopulating after the war. And women, they had only been allowed to vote for 5 years. 5! This was the rigid, traditional world she was pushing back against.
And the main tool in her philosophical toolkit was existentialism. This is the idea, made famous by her partner Jean-Paul Sartre, that existence precedes essence. What that means is, you're not born with some preset identity. You have to create yourself through the choices you make. And for her, this idea changed everything.
And she was incredibly thorough. She didn't just stick to one idea. She built her case like a detective, using these 3 different lenses to look at the idea of womanhood from every conceivable angle, from economics to individual freedom to the myths buried deep in our subconscious.
So, after all this analysis, she lands on the book's central, most explosive concept, and that's the idea of woman as the other. Honestly, this is the intellectual engine driving the entire book.
Okay, so in philosophy, a subject is the self, right? The center of the universe from its own point of view. The other is everything that's not the self. It's only defined by its relationship to the subject. And de Beauvoir's big argument was that for all of human history, man has positioned himself as the subject.
This really breaks down the whole dynamic, doesn't it? Man is the default, the positive. He is the self. Woman, on the other hand, is defined by what she's not. She's not a man. She's the negative, the inessential. She only exists in relation to him.
And that brings us to maybe the single most famous line from the entire book. It's a sentence that perfectly captures her whole argument. See, for her, this isn't about biology, it's about society. This single line is the heart of her existentialist feminism.
In other words, this whole idea of femininity, all the traits, the behaviors, the expectations that we lump together under that word, it isn't natural. It's not something you're born with. It's something that civilization builds, that it manufactures and teaches to girls from the second they're born.
And de Beauvoir lays out exactly how this manufacturing happens. Think about it. Dolls teach a little girl to see herself as a pretty object to be pampered and admired. History books and fairy tales are all about what men did. Slowly but surely, society teaches a girl that her value isn't in what she does, but in how she appears to others. Okay, so what happens when you drop these ideas into the world of 1949? Well, it wasn't just a ripple. It was a shockwave. The book didn't just start a few arguments, it kicked off an absolute firestorm.
The reaction was immediate and it was brutal. People called de Beauvoir all sorts of names. They said the book was disgusting, that it was an insult to good French mothers, a total threat to society. The outrage was off the charts.
And what's wild is that the attacks came from everywhere. The conservative right, well, they were absolutely horrified, but the political left just dismissed it as a bourgeois distraction from the class struggle. Even her supposed intellectual friends like Albert Camus basically said it was an unfair attack on French men. But the journey of this book is just fascinating. It goes from being officially condemned by the Vatican to becoming the philosophical blueprint for the women's lib movement in the 1970s. And today, you literally cannot study gender, queer theory, or modern feminism without grappling with its ideas. And here's the ultimate twist.
If you pick up The Second Sex today and think, a lot of this seems kind of obvious, that's not a criticism of the book. It's the greatest testament to its success. Its ideas were so powerful, so revolutionary, they actually became our common sense. It changed the very words we use to talk about these things.
So that leaves us with one last question to chew on. De Beauvoir showed us how the idea of woman was something that civilization built. Now, all these years later, in a world that's been so deeply shaped by her ideas, it's worth asking ourselves, what parts of that old construction have we taken down, and what new things are we building in its place?